Let's try and unpack today's court proceedings, and we're joined for this conversation by Global Center for Advanced Studies Research Fellow, Professor Richard Pithouse, and joining us via Zoom is political analyst Sandile Swana. To both of you, thank you very much for making time for us. Can I start in studio here, Professor Pithouse, and ask you a very simple question, but clearly one that has evoked lots of emotions from people. Does the punishment fit the crime?
Look, this is a complicated thing and there's a lot to say.
Yeah.
But in terms of that question, I think that we cannot allow a situation where, people randomly fire weapons into the air in a packed stadium, clearly. And I also think that we have to take seriously the fact that we've got a serious problem of gun violence in this country, and romanticizing guns and presenting them that way is a problem. Nonetheless, it's a massive problem that it was AfriForum that raised this case, because they have no social credibility in this country. We could talk about that perhaps. But to answer your question, I don't think so. I don't think 5 years in jail is an appropriate sentence. I personally don't think we should be putting anyone in prison if they're not a direct threat to other people's safety. I think prison is a very dangerous, toxic institution that damages people. And there are all kinds of forms of restorative justice that in many cases would be better, including in this case.
Mr. Swana, can I put the exact same question to you, whether the punishment meted out by the court today fits the crime?
Yes, I agree with the view that we should discourage this type of behavior openly and educate the community. But I think the sentence is highly appealable, and I think it could have been better designed. I understand the sentiments and feelings around it, but I think the sentence is rather harsh.
Yeah. Okay, let's come back to you, Richard. You've spoken about AfriForum, and it's a part where you wish to go, and perhaps let's go there. Because for some time yesterday, in fact, it was quite a topical matter, whether there is remorse on the part of Mr. Malema, given the attacks on the judge. Today, I think he took it a notch up because he has called Toinette Olivier on the back of this sentence a racist of note, and that possibly she could be a member of AfriForum. Of course, he's provided no proof to back these claims. But your thoughts around AfriForum's pursuit of this matter? What do you think they wanted to achieve here?
Look, we need to deal with the problem of gun violence in this country. That includes dealing with the culture around it. And I think we need to draw a very clear line about what democratic politics looks like. And 30 years after apartheid, there really is no need for any kind of militarized symbolism. But it should have been a democratic state dealing with this issue. Our state does not deal with these kinds of issues. I live in Melville. We're near West Park Cemetery. People fire guns into the air at funerals. The police are there. They don't do anything. Why is one person being singled out? AfriForum are not intervening to make a general point that people shouldn't be able to fire guns in built-up areas, as the law says. They are particularly targeting Julius Malema, and that is political. And that is extremely unfortunate, because a genuine issue, a genuine legal issue, and a genuine political issue about how we do politics in a democracy has now been completely sort of overwhelmed by the fact that it's raised by an extremely right-wing organization that they would deny it, but I think if you look objectively at the positions they take, I don't see how you can say they aren't racists. I'm not saying that it's okay to say that about the magistrate. That is straight from the playbook of all of the kind of right-wing populists around the world, where they imply conspiracy theories about courts and so on.
Mr. Swana, can I possibly add a dimension to what Professor Richard Pithouse has just said, and that is that people fire guns in the air almost every other day, and you would know perhaps some of this. I witnessed it growing up. A a person who would be known in the community to have committing crimes, stealing cars in particular, and they die as a result of what they have been doing. You would have cars being spun around, your donuts, and people shooting in the air. That's how a criminal would be laid to rest, right? This is what we grew up with. So the Pithouse, Professor Pithouse is possibly on the money here. Did politics find expression inside the courtroom today?
The politics inside the courtroom today, the politics come not only today, but from the origins of the case. The AfriForum has intervened to say that from their point of view, Malema in the township of Mdantsane was endangering the members of his own political party, the EFF, and the surrounding community of Mdantsane. Something that is unprecedented in the history of AfriForum. The cases that you mentioned actually are there, but the case that is quite relevant is whether South Africans have a tendency during happy moments, during celebratory moments, to fire guns in the air. And I would venture to say many dignitaries could follow Malema to jail if the complete record could be revealed. So we do need to educate the community, law-abiding citizens, to refrain from shooting in this manner, because the law has since been tightened. These things are not permitted in law, and in actual fact, other than the law, they just present a serious danger to people.
Professor Pithouse, I'm going to borrow from Mr. Swana and say to you, we're not talking about an ordinary human being here. We're talking about a political leader who leads one of the country's biggest political organizations. He's a member of parliament. He is supposed to lead by example. And in all probability, if he's listening, watching us tonight, he'll probably attack me when I reference someone who was recently in his political party, who now is an outsider, who was questioned in one of the social media platforms. When questioned, Floyd Chibambu says, actually, if you ask me, playing around with guns is actually childish behavior. Does Julius Malema need to reflect on what he's done and perhaps do better?
Yes, I mean, I think we have to ask that question. You know, we can make the point about AfriForum, about the sentence, but you said childish. In a way it is. It's, I mean, what is it to stand in front of a stadium full of people and fire a rifle? I mean, you're trying to evoke the romance of the guerrilla, of the armed struggle. That's 30 years in the past. This is peacetime, you know? There's nothing in the EFF's objectives that can't be won through organizing their constituency, winning an election.
In a country that's filled with violent behavior, as you said in your earlier
Precisely. We have one of the highest murder rates in the world. It is extremely dangerous for us to keep encouraging this sense that having a gun makes you a big man. You know, we need to be mature. And, you know, we've all seen that this is something that is pervasive in our society. And if you look at I mean, there's just more and more guns. There's 5 million and something guns in our society. But we have to be responsible and say we need to make a break with that. We need to make a break with the culture of violence and the culture of guns. We need to do everything we can to scale back the culture and the number of guns. And yes, Julius Malema was reckless. He was politically irresponsible, because who are the people who are most at risk of gun violence? It's not AfriForum. It's not white monopoly capital. It's mostly impoverished African people and colored people who are most at risk of gun violence. If you are genuinely concerned about that constituency, you should be building a culture of peace. That doesn't mean acquiescence to oppression.
Yeah.
Not at all.
Mr. Swana, politically, how does this look for Mr. Malema? Today, he stood on that platform and basically castigated any and everyone that he saw as an enemy, but looking at the general populace of South Africa and how they view his actions of what has led him to where he is now and the subsequent reaction from him after learning of his fate. What do you think, where do you think this puts him politically as a figure that people look up to in the country?
I think we have a good history. I mean, let me not say a good history, a clear history, rather. Let me use that, where people use these types of misfortunes and conflicts with the law to build political capital. Zuma is the #1 expert in that field. And Malema, in his build-up, political build-up, he was very close to Zuma as well, especially around 2005 and right up 2008 and so on. So he knows this. However, I think we do need to make this point. I actually expect EFF to build political capital out of this. It is clear from the facts that AfriForum is behind this. Therefore, there's a right-wing element that is clear. 2, you need to then say you address this politically through political education and mass mobilization, not through any potential violence of any kind or any hints of violence. All these issues must be settled not through the bullet, but through the ballot box. African history has not succeeded because the ballot was de-emphasized and the bullet in most of our neighboring countries, Angola and Mozambique, overemphasized, and perpetual chaos followed. So we need to be aware that these are politics of the ballot, and you can build your rhetoric and propaganda around the errors that AfriForum has made and the activities of the right wing, including those of Trump. There's enough stock. You don't need to dramatize anything further than that.
Let's wrap it up, Professor Pithouse. Reasonable prospects of success. The magistrate very clear today that she does not believe there are prospects in terms of his conviction, but the sentence meted out that a different court could possibly find different. Do you see this going all the way to the Constitutional Court, which is what one of the leaders has said today?
Look, I'm not a lawyer, and even if I was, lawyers are not really in the business of prediction, but I would imagine that there are good prospects of appealing the sentence. And I'm sure that if the EFF don't get the results they want, they will push it as far as they can. But, you can't just push it to the Constitutional Court because you want to and you got the money. I mean, you've got to go through the Supreme Court of Appeal and so on. So it may not happen. But yeah, I would think they would have a case to argue for sure.
I see Mr. Swana nodding very feverishly behind us. Very quickly, I'll give you the last bite as well. Reasonable prospects of success?
Yeah, I think the sentence can be appealed, absolutely no doubt. And obviously, they are going to appeal the sentence itself, the conviction itself. So they have good prospects, no doubt about it.
To both of you, gentlemen, thank you very much for your analysis tonight. Mr. Sandile Swana talking to us via the virtual platform. Professor Richard Pithouse, thank you very much for making time to join us in studio tonight.
Great.